purchase it at a much cheaper price. You know, you go to, I've been to New Orleans, been in some airports, especially down in Washington and just different places where there's street vendors. You can buy a Rolex that looks just like a Rolex. It looks like it costs $15,000, but it costs $100, you know, and it's not really a real one. And, you know, you think about just us as people, you can buy just about anything that's fake. You can get fake nails, you can get fake hair, you can get fake teeth, you can get fake body parts, you can get fake tans. You can go out and you can find at some restaurants, you can go and order a taco and it doesn't even have real meat or real cheese. It's got fake meat and fake cheese. You can get fake sugar for your coffee. We can wear fake designer clothes that look like leather or look like fur. But one thing that we have to understand is there's one thing out there that we can't fake. We can't fake our faith. We have to have a real, genuine faith. You know, fake faith does not work. We need a faith that's going to work when life doesn't seem to be working. You know, and in the Bible, in this book of James that we've been looking at, in the Bible in general, there's over 6,000 promises. But fake faith won't activate any of them. You know, we need these promises to be stable. We need these promises to be strong. We need these promises to be healthy. But to be able to access this kind of promise, we have to have a faith that's real, legitimate, and genuine faith. Fake faith has no power to change our life or our circumstances. It has no power to save us. It has no power to answer our prayers. It has no power to transform our lives. And when we have life that doesn't work the way that it seems to be looking right now, everything that we've known, everything that we've been a part of, everything has changed and is different. But now we're in the book of James and we're in the second half of chapter 2. And James writes a little essay in here, and he's going to help us with the difference between real faith and fake faith. But it's going to take us about 3 different services to get through this. But if we would just really realize what he's saying right here, it can practically change our lives, it can change our circumstances, and it will be very helpful for us to understand. And it's very simple to understand. James lays it out. It's really a very simple thing to know the difference between fake faith and real faith. You know, you think about it, have you ever wondered sometimes why our prayers don't get answered? Sometimes there's nothing wrong with our request or what we're asking for. Sometimes we're not using real faith. We're just saying a prayer out of just hot air sometimes. But in chapter 2, he's going to help us with this. It's chapter 2, verses 14 through 20. And this is what he says. He says, "Dear brothers and sisters, what's the use in saying I have faith if you don't prove it by your actions? What kind of faith, this kind of faith, cannot save you? Suppose you see your brother or sister who needs food or clothing, and you say to them, I wish you well, I feel for you, I hope you stay warm and eat well, but then you do nothing to meet their needs. What good does your sympathy do? It's worth nothing. In the same way, faith, if it is not accompanied by action, does not work. It is dead and it is useless. Now, some may argue, some can have faith while other people do good deeds. But I see faith if I don't see any good works in you. I don't see good works to show for it. In contrast, I will show you my faith by my good deeds. Now you say, well, I believe there is a God. And I say, well, good for you. But even the demons believe and are afraid. It is foolish not to realize that faith in God is useless if you don't do what God wants you to do. After reading that, had some thinking on it, and I remember some things that Paul had said, and it seemed like they had contradicted each other, but then I realized that they didn't contradict each other, they actually complemented each other, because you have to understand who they're talking to. Paul's talking about works, and he's talking about keeping the Jewish law to be saved. James is talking about doing good works and doing good deeds because we are already saved. So he's talking to two different classes of people, and it doesn't contradict itself. But James is telling us we need to live like Jesus because we are saved. And Jesus lived by faith. He had a real faith. But James first tells us a couple of things and gives us a few examples of what real faith really is. And I was going through this today, and it's actually something we can use to quiz ourselves. The Bible tells us to examine ourselves, so we can use these things to examine ourselves and find out if we have some of these faith things in our life. But in verse 14, he says, "Dear brothers and sisters, what's the use of saying you have faith if you do not prove it by your actions? That kind of faith cannot save anybody." So basically, he's saying, what's the use in having faith if you don't have any actions behind it? If you're not doing anything that God's telling you to do, if you don't have God's actions in your life. The first thing he says here is real faith is more than just the words I say. It's more than memorized prayers. I know that even us teaching Jordan how to pray, we say, "Now I lay me down to sleep." We teach him that little prayer, but there comes a time in our life when we have to move away from that prayer and start praying real prayers. Just because you say that little prayer or teach your kids to say that prayer doesn't mean they know the Lord. Doesn't mean that we have faith. It's just something that we're saying, really. Just claiming that I have faith doesn't prove that I have real faith. Knowing all the phrases that we use in church and the lingo that we use and the religious phrases that we use doesn't mean that I have faith. Have you ever met, this is one thing you can look at, have you ever met anybody that sounded like a real good believer, but their life looked totally different? That's not faith. They knew all the right phrases, but their life was 100 degrees different than what they were saying out of their mouth. Their life doesn't match their words. Studies have shown that in the United States, most people claim to be Christian. Most Americans say that I'm a Christian, but they don't act like one. You just look at the stuff going on right now. Half the people in a lot of bad situations will say they are believers. We've seen the outburst of racism, and I don't care what you say, that's not Christ-like. When we treat people with disrespect, it's not Christ-like. You can't call yourself a believer and still live the same way you were living before you were a believer. That's not faith. Real faith is more than words. Matthew 7:21. Matthew 7:21, and we've all heard this story. And this is Jesus talking. And he says, "Not everyone who says, 'I am their Lord,' is going to enter the kingdom of heaven." So he's telling us, he's giving us a warning that a lot of people who say I'm a Christian, or a lot of people who say I'm a believer, are not going to enter the heaven. And that's Jesus talking. He says, only the people who will enter heaven are those who do what my Father in heaven wants them to do. I think that's a pretty powerful verse. Very eye-opening. A lot of times we have to ask ourselves, am I doing what God wants me to do, or am I doing what I want to do? So it's not just what we say, it's actually what we do. I can remember one time driving down the road, and accidentally cut someone off, not on purpose, but it happens sometimes. We can go into another lane thinking about something else. And they came around me and did some stuff and said some things. And then when they pulled in front of me, there's 3 Christian bumper stickers on their bumper. And I'm just thinking, man, sure didn't act like what that bumper was saying. But that's just how we are. There's a lot of phony faith out there. There's a lot of stuff that we don't really value that God says. And fake faith has no value. It's worthless. It doesn't work. It's more than words that I just say. The second thing that James shows us is that real faith is more than an emotion that we feel. You can be inspired. You can be emotionally moved. You can have goosebumps, but that doesn't mean you have faith. James gives us an example of this in James 15-17. He says, suppose you see your brother or sister and they need food or clothing, and you say to them, I wish you well, I feel for you, I hope you stay warm, I hope you eat well, but then you do nothing to meet their needs. What good does your sympathy do? It's worth nothing. And that's somebody who's all welled up with emotions about something they see, but they do absolutely nothing about it. So our emotions can run wild on us, and if we don't do anything, we haven't done anything. It's been worthless. James says, if it's not accompanied by actions, it does not work and is dead. He said the faith is dead and useless. There's 32,000 people out of work right now in the United States. 32 million people that don't have a job right now. If you were to go up to somebody who's out of work and they need food, and they're cold and they're hungry, and you tell them that you feel for them, and that you hope them well, that you hope they have somewhere to rest, you tell them to cheer up and to be happy. We've got all these great cliches that we tell people, but if we don't do anything for them, we're not moving in our faith. One of the things that we have that we say to a lot of people, I'll pray for you. How many times have we told somebody that we would pray for them, or that they come to us and they say, I need you to pray for me, and you say, oh yeah, I'll pray for you, and then we haven't ever done it. There's a lot of people out there that we tell them we'll pray for, and they don't need our prayer, they need our help. They do need prayer, but they're also there because there's something that they need from us, and a lot of us have the means to be able to do it. So you can say the words all you want, but it's not actually faith unless you do something about it. Now, if you were to go outside and slam your finger in the door, and it's hung in the door and you can't get it out, and I walk by and say, I'll pray for you, well, you don't want my prayer. You want me to open the door and get your finger out of the door. Some people are in that kind of situation. They really need us to do something for them. They need our assistance. They need us to help them. And faith is moving in action to do that. Faith would be sensing their pain and going over there and helping. See, real faith is practical, and it's involved with people's needs. It's something that we do as an action. Faith is not something that just sits there. You see, in the Word, every time you see faith, if you have faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. It does something. Faith does something. So just examine yourself as we're going through these next 2 messages, because it gets a little deeper and a little deeper on what faith is and what faith is not. And read that in the book of James. Just read chapter 2 a couple of times. And are we working in our faith? Are we actually doing things to help others?